Chapter 1. The Smell of Cherries. Sebastian's house stood on the outskirts, where the coastal road disappeared into tall grass, and the shadows of low-growing pine trees began to stretch toward the horizon. The old stone in the foundation of the house remembered storms and calm, and the shutters, sealed on the windward side, trembled only in response to the breath of the sea. July in these parts was short, like a flash of childish joy. It began with the sticky smell of honey and ended with a sudden cold snap. Sebastian always knew when the right day came. Not by the numbers, not by the calendar, but by the morning light that fell on the kitchen table at a certain angle, reflecting off a cracked porcelain mug. On such a day, he would go to the market, the one with rickety stalls and old men selling cherries in paper boxes. He would take his time choosing. The fruit had to be slightly soft, but without dents, with dark, almost black skin. His hands trembled as he returned home. He washed the berries carefully, as if touching someone's fingers. Sugar syrup was already boiling on the stove. The smell began to fill the house to the roof, penetrating every corner, displacing the salty air, seeking a way into his memory. He laid the berries out on a towel and placed an old notebook in front of him. The handwriting in it was sharp and flowing. The lines always began the same way. "Do you remember that summer, Sebastian?" And these words sent a chill down his spine, as if a window had opened onto the past, where he had left a part of himself. While the dough was rising, he went out onto the porch. The linden tree by the house was already in bloom, and yellow flowers trembled and fell right onto his shoulders. The wind from the sea brought coolness, but he did not feel cold. Sebastian looked into the distance, where the sky merged with the water. That was where she was supposed to come from, as always. She had no name, no age. He knew her face, knew the curve of her shoulders, knew how her hair darkened when the sunset light fell on it. He didn't ask himself where this knowledge came from. He just waited. That's what he did every year. And always, on this very day, a second voice appeared in the house. Barely audible, like quiet laughter behind his back, like the footsteps of bare feet on a wooden floor. He didn't turn around right away. He knew that if he looked too sharply, everything would disappear. So he moved slowly, cautiously, like a man afraid of awakening a memory. This year, the voice returned especially early. He heard it even before the pie was put in the oven. And then Sebastian realized, time is relentless. Even ghosts are in a hurry. He put the kettle on. He covered the table with a white tablecloth and took out 2 cups. One with a blue rim, his. The second, with a barely noticeable crack on the handle, was for her. He poured the tea, put cherries on a saucer, and cut the pie. The house was filled with the scent of the past. And in his heart, something burned that had not let go for decades. He waited, and he knew she would come. Because the linden tree was in bloom, because the pie was ready, because this house still remembered. And maybe that was all he had left, playing with a memory that had never faded with time. But Sebastian still believed. And maybe it was in that belief that his last love lay. Translated with dpel.com, free version. Chapter 2. Shadow Beyond the Threshold. The day was drawing to a close, and the sun was sinking below the horizon with that special grandeur that can only be found in places forgotten by the world. The shadows grew longer, and each one seemed familiar to Sebastian, as if time were painting old pictures cut out of his youth. He cleared the remains of the pie from the table, although the second piece remained untouched. The cup was also full. Its tea was cooling, a glassy film fogging up the porcelain. Sebastian touched neither one nor the other. Everything had to be as it always was, the way she remembered it. He went out onto the porch, grabbing a blanket. The linden tree rustled in the evening air, dry, melodious, almost like a whisper. He wrapped himself up and gazed into the distance. His eyes were tired, streaked with time, but they still burned with fire. Not a flame, no. More like a smoldering ember. One that warms but does not burn. When a cool breeze blew in from the sea, he suddenly heard a floorboard creak. A light sound, as if someone had stopped at the door barefoot. Sebastian did not turn around. He just nodded, almost imperceptibly, and began to speak. He spoke aloud, softly, with a smile, as if to a living person. "As always, you came on time. I thought you would be late this year. The linden trees bloomed early. Or maybe I'm just getting old, and the days are flying by faster." The silence around him was filled with warmth. He felt it, Not with his eyes, not with his ears, but with something internal, ancient like an instinct. He knew she was nearby. Not the girl from his youth, no. An image, a memory that had become flesh. Or perhaps a part of himself that had never been able to move on from that very summer. Inside the house, a tap dripped quietly. The ticking of the clock seemed louder than usual, and yet there was something alive in this silence. Sebastian spoke again, not to answer, but to fill the void. He told her how a boy had sold him cherries at the market today. He said, "Who's the pie for, Grandpa?" And winked. Sebastian smiled. I replied that it was for you. The boy didn't understand, of course. But you know, I'm glad I can still surprise people. He fell silent. Then he whispered, "You haven't forgotten me, have you?" And the shadow in the doorway seemed to flinch. Only for a moment. Only slightly. But he felt it. Later, he would talk to her about the sea, about the stars, about the old record he never managed to find again. He would listen for her answer in the rustling of the leaves, in the gentle swaying of the swing, in the way the scent of cherries lingered a little longer in the air. But for now, he just sat next to her, to what had been her, what remained of her, what lived in him like breath. And night fell on their old house like a blanket. And the stars came out one by one, exactly as they should, exactly as he remembered. Because she was here again, and Sebastian was no longer alone. Chapter 3. The Door That Won't Close. Sebastian woke up early, as always, before the first rays of sunlight. The house breathed with him. The floorboards creaked as if stretching their bones after sleep. The shutters groaned plaintively in the light morning breeze, and the kettle in the corner of the kitchen seemed to turn on at his glance. Everything was as usual, as it should be. He walked barefoot into the living room. The pillow on the chair was slightly crumpled, not as if he himself had been sitting there. Rather, as if someone had simply leaned over, sitting down for a moment, as if in thought. He didn't touch it, just smiled, as one smiles at someone one has known for a long time, even if one hasn't seen them in ages. Yesterday's pie was still on the table. One piece was missing. Sebastian wasn't even surprised. Last year, flowers disappeared from the vase. 2 years ago, someone hung a paper crane in the window. And even earlier, a child's handprint had been left on the mirror in the hallway, thin, almost transparent, but undoubtedly real. He didn't explain anything, didn't look for answers. In this house, answers were unnecessary. He sat down at the old typewriter and slowly began to type. The paper filled with words, not about events, not about facts, but about feelings, smells, dreams. It was his way of remembering, his way of being. Sometimes he didn't even reread what he had written. He just wrote and put aside page after page, folding them into a box under the bed. He called it Letters to Those Who Will One Day Return. When the sun was fully risen, Sebastian decided to walk to the lighthouse. He walked along the path along the cliff, which he had known since childhood, but each time he found something new. A crack in the rock, a patch of moss, a shadow falling in a new way. And each time he felt someone walking beside him. Not by the hand, not close by, but nearby, in rhythm with his steps, in the silence that grew warmer with the presence. The lighthouse had been closed for many years, but Sebastian kept the key to it. He climbed the creaky stairs, breathed in the air saturated with salt and thyme, and gazed into the distance for a long time. There were no sails, only the horizon, smooth as a breath. And suddenly a rustle, as if a dress had touched the railing. He didn't turn around. He knew. When he returned home, there was a piece of paper in the mailbox. No envelope, no address. The handwriting was delicate, confident, with a slight slant. Just one sentence. "I still remember how your pie smelled." He pressed the paper to his chest, closed his eyes, and for a moment felt like a boy again. The same boy, young, in love, confused. The one who once opened the door to let summer in and still can't close it. Chapter 4. When Summer Never Ends. That evening, Sebastian lit candles, even though the electricity was working. He claimed that flames were not just light, but memories frozen in motion. Candles stood in every room, casting soft shadows on the worn wallpaper, which remembered more than any diary. It smelled of cherries, hot dough, and a slight sadness, as if the house was once again absorbing warmth so that it could give it back on winter nights. He sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the sea hum. Its sound was always different. Sometimes it was as if someone was whispering at the other end of the house. Sometimes it was like the rumblings of distant memory. Today it sounded soothing, as if it knew he was ready to hear it. He held that very note in his hands. The paper was thin, almost transparent, and he caught himself thinking, did it even exist? Maybe it was just another trick of his memory, or rather his longing? But the scent of the ink was real, and the soft unevenness in the corner where someone, or something, had torn the sheet out of the notebook. And then there was the handwriting. Handwriting he hadn't seen since the 60s, but which he recognized at first glance. He got up, went into the living room, and pulled that very box out from under the bed. Inside were hundreds of letters he had never sent to anyone. He wrote them every year, every July on the same day. He always began the same way. If you are ever near me again. He carefully placed the new note on top. At that moment, the wind blew open the window. The candle flared up brighter, and a paper napkin swirled on the floor at his feet. He bent down, picked it up, and froze. There was a lipstick mark on the napkin. The same color, cherry, warm like summer. He remembered it. He remembered the lips that kissed his neck by the water, remembered the voice that laughed in the thickest of the sun's glare. And then he heard it, quiet footsteps in the hallway. He didn't turn around. In this house, you didn't need to see to know that someone had come. Someone who didn't disappear, but simply waited. Just like him. He closed his eyes, sank into the chair, and exhaled calmly, like a man who had finally let go of the years. And in that breath there was gratitude, for the memory, for the anticipation, for the fact that even if it was all just a figment of his imagination, he was not alone. The next morning, the neighbors came to check on Sebastian, as usual. The house was filled with the aroma of pie. There were 2 place settings on the table. Tea was still steaming in the cup. Sebastian was sitting in an armchair with a slight smile on his face. It seemed as if he had simply dozed off. But there was a photograph on his lap. It showed a young Sebastian and a girl in a summer dress standing by a lighthouse. On the back, someone had written in fine handwriting, "You always knew how to bake, Summer. I came for the last piece."